October 14, 1943. 25,000 feet above Germany, Staff Sergeant Michael Romano crouches in the tight, freezing tail section of his B-17, gripping 2.50 caliber machine guns that weigh more than he does. Through the small plexiglass window, he watches a Focke-Wulf 19 maneuver into position for an attack run, approaching from 6 o'clock low, the most vulnerable angle for any bomber. Romano narrows his eyes through the crude ring and bead sight. This basic setup, nothing more than two pieces of metal he must align with a moving target, offers no compensation for speed, no calculation for lead, no assistance of any kind as the two aircraft drive toward each other at a combined speed of more than 500 miles per hour. He fires. His tracers sweep harmlessly behind the diving fighter. The FW-190's cannons erupt in flashes as 20mm shells slice through the bomber's aluminum skin like paper. This scenario plays out 291 times during the second Schweinfurt raid. The 8th Air Force sends 291 B-17 Flying Fortresses deep into Germany with no fighter escort. By nightfall, 60 of them, over 20% of the entire attacking force, will be shot out of the sky. Another 138 limp home so badly damaged they will never fly again. 600 American airmen are dead. The math is brutal and impossible to sustain. At this pace, no bomber crew will statistically survive the required 25 missions. Post-mission reports reveal a stark reality. Tail gunners, supposedly the bomber's final shield against the Germans' preferred attack angle, are achieving hit rates of less than 8%. German fighter pilots need only approach from behind, endure a few seconds of inaccurate return fire, and then tear apart America's billion-dollar bombing campaign one aircraft at a time. Senior commanders gather at 8th Air Force Headquarters at High Wycombe in England. The defensive weapons that were supposed to make the B-17 a true flying fortress had failed catastrophically. Without a solution, the entire doctrine of daylight precision bombing is on the verge of collapse. What these commanders do not yet know is that at this exact moment, on a cold hardstand at Bassingbourn Airfield, a 22-year-old tail gunner with only a high school education is sketching a design in his logbook that violates multiple Army Air Forces regulations. This design, dismissed by mechanical engineers as mechanically impossible, will eventually triple tail gun accuracy and save thousands of American lives. This is the story of the innovation the authorities tried to ban and the gunner who refused to let it die. To understand why Romano's idea proved revolutionary, you first need to understand the nearly impossible situation tail gunners faced in 1943. The B-17 Flying Fortress entered combat with a defensive philosophy borrowed from naval warfare. Covered in machine guns intended to create overlapping zones of fire, the bomber force was expected to defend itself simply by throwing massive amounts of lead into the sky. Army Air Force's propaganda called it a flying battleship. Reality was far harsher. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano arrived at Bassingbourn Airfield in August 1943 as a replacement tail gunner for the 91st Bomb Group. He was a former factory worker from Pittsburgh with no college education, no engineering experience, and barely 19 years behind him when he enlisted. The Army trained him for 6 weeks. How to clear weapon jams, estimate range, and hope his bullets found their mark. His assigned station in the tail was barely bigger than a coffin. He had to kneel on a bicycle-style seat, brace his feet against the aircraft structure, and manhandle twin Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns within a tight firing arc. The guns sat on a simple yoke mount. His aiming system was nothing more than a ring and post sight, a metal circle with a front post, no more advanced than a frontier rifle. To hit a diving fighter, Romano had to estimate the target's speed relative to his own aircraft, calculate the necessary deflection, aim ahead of the target, compensate for bullet drop, and perform all of this while wearing thick gloves in -40-degree temperatures. He had to fire before the German pilot's cannons, whose effective range was 4 times greater, could reduce his position to shrapnel. Even expert gunners trained at peacetime aerial gunnery schools managed hit rates just above 12% under controlled conditions. In combat, under stress, deprived of oxygen, and being shot at, real hit rates plunged between 6 and 8%. The Luftwaffe quickly recognized this weakness. Throughout 1943, German fighter doctrine evolved: attack from directly behind at level or low altitude, accept 15 to 20 seconds of poorly aimed tail gun fire at roughly 200 yards, and unleash devastating 20mm cannon fire. Luftwaffe after-action reports described B-17 tail guns as only slightly dangerous, far too inaccurate to deter attacks. The losses mounted. August 17, 1943, the first Schweinfurt raid, 60 bombers lost. October 8, 1943, the Bremen raid, 30 lost. October 10, 1943, the Münster raid, another 30. The 8th Air Force was losing bombers faster than American factories could replace them. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the Army Air Forces, received casualty reports in Washington and began questioning whether daylight bombing could continue at all. Engineers offered solutions: more guns, larger calibers, powered turrets. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center started designing an improved tail turret, but it would not be ready until 1944. Prototype-powered turrets existed, but installing them required removing the entire tail section, a month-long factory upgrade impossible for combat-ready bombers already deployed in England. Meanwhile, aircrews were dying. Michael Romano flew his first combat mission on August 19, 1943, against Gilsrain Airfield in the Netherlands. He fired 480 rounds at 3 attacking FW-190s. He believed he scored hits. Later, gun camera footage showed every tracer passing harmlessly behind the fighters. 2 bombers in his formation were destroyed. After his third mission, Romano remained on the hardstand after landing, staring at his guns, searching for the answer no engineer had solved.
His hands tremble, not from fear but from sheer physical exhaustion after wrestling 84-pound weapons through sustained bursts of fire while kneeling at high altitude. That night, he sketches his first real concept. He realizes the problem is not the gun and not even the mount. The real issue is that tail gunners are effectively firing blind, chasing targets they cannot properly track and aiming at points in space they cannot reliably predict. What Romano needs is something the Army Air Forces has never given him: a way to know where his bullets will actually go before he presses the trigger. He needs a reflector sight. But the cramped space of the tail position makes installing a standard reflector sight impossible, unless someone is willing to break the rules. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano has absolutely no formal qualifications in weapons engineering. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1924, he dropped out of high school at 16 to work in the steel mills when his father fell ill. He operated blast furnaces, repaired heavy equipment, and learned practical metallurgy through experience rather than theory. When the United States entered the war, he enlisted in the Army Air Forces, determined to leave factory life behind. The military assigned him to aerial gunnery school, not because of any special talent, but because he was small enough to fit inside a B-17's tail compartment. At 5'7" and 145 pounds, he could squeeze into spaces that ruled out larger recruits. He completed basic gunnery training at Harlingen, Texas, scoring only average on the range. His instructors noted competent trigger control and acceptable weapons maintenance, nothing extraordinary. He earned his silver wings and an assignment to a B-17 crew as yet another interchangeable component in the vast machinery of the 8th Air Force. But Romano had one trait no training report ever recorded: he could not tolerate systems that did not work. After his 5th mission on October 4, 1943, Frankfurt, Romano reached a breaking point. His bomber returned riddled with 78 flak holes and bearing damage from 2 fighter attacks. Romano fired 620 rounds and hit absolutely nothing. His best friend, a tail gunner on a neighboring B-17, was killed when a Bf-109 attacked from dead astern, and Romano's counterfire failed to deter it. That night, carrying a maintenance flashlight and his logbook, Romano walked to the aircraft revetment. He climbed back into the tail section, still smelling of cordite and hydraulic fluid, and stared at the ring and bead sight. His breakthrough did not arrive as some dramatic epiphany, but as a simple observation. Romano noticed his own reflection in the curved plexiglass window. In that distorted reflection, he could see behind the aircraft, into angles the ring and bead sight could never reach. He began sketching quickly. What if he mounted small mirrors at precise angles to give him peripheral vision beyond the sight's narrow field? What if those mirrors revealed the tracer stream from his own guns, letting him adjust fire by watching the reflections instead of squinting through primitive sights? And then came the critical insight. What if he combined those mirrors with a simple reflector sight, just a piece of glass etched with a reticle, positioned so he could track targets while simultaneously observing his tracer paths in the mirrors? It wouldn't be a true computing gun sight like the gyroscopic systems used in fighters. It would be a jury-rigged combination of reflective surfaces and improvised aiming aids. But it might actually work. Romano spent 3 hours that night sketching designs, measuring angles, and calculating sight lines with a carpenter's protractor he borrowed from the base machine shop. By dawn, he had detailed drawings for a mirror-assisted reflector sight system requiring no powered components, no complex wiring, and no factory-level modifications. He also had a serious problem. His design violated Army Air Force's Technical Order 20-120-EG-2, which prohibited unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. Installing it without authorization could lead to a court-martial. Romano decided he did not care. He found his partner in crime in an unexpected corner of the base, the sheet metal shop. Technical Sergeant Frank Kellerman, a 38-year-old aircraft mechanic from Detroit, had spent the Depression in the Civilian Conservation Corps building bridges and repairing machinery with whatever scrap he could find. When Romano approached him on October 7th with sketches and a request for off-the-books fabrication work, Kellerman studied the drawings for less than 5 minutes. "This is illegal," Kellerman stated flatly. Romano nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." "You're asking me to modify defensive armament without engineering approval. That violates about 6 technical orders." "Yes, Sergeant." Kellerman looked up from the sketches. "When do you fly again?" "Tomorrow, Munster." "Then we'd better get started." They began work after midnight in a corner of the maintenance hangar, using scrap materials Kellerman had unofficially collected. The core components came from salvaged aircraft parts, curved mirrors from damaged navigation instruments, plexiglass from shattered canopy panels, and aluminum brackets from written-off airframes. The key piece, the reflector sight, came from the wreck of a P-47 Thunderbolt. Kellerman removed the intact gun sight assembly, originally designed for a nose-mounted installation, and re-engineered its mounting hardware so it would fit the tail gunner's cramped space. The mirror system proved even more challenging. Romano wanted 3 small convex mirrors positioned at angles that gave him peripheral visibility of his tracer pattern without blocking his forward vision. Kellerman fabricated adjustable brackets from sheet aluminum and ball and socket joints scavenged from control surface linkages. They worked through the night, fitting parts, checking sight lines, and making adjustments. At 0430 hours, Kellerman installed the full assembly in Romano's aircraft, a B-17G named Knockout Dropper. While the flight line slept, the installation looked crude. Brackets held by standard aircraft bolts, mirrors secured with safety wire, and the reflector sight attached to the gun yoke with a welded bracket that would have horrified any Boeing engineer.
Nothing about the modification appears in the aircraft's maintenance logbook. At the dawn briefing, Romano keeps quiet about the new sight. His pilot, Lieutenant James Holbrook, does not check the tail section before takeoff. The group commander has no idea. The squadron armament officer has no idea. At 0730 hours, they depart from Münster. Over Germany, at 10:15 hours, a Bf-109 begins its attack run, coming in from 6 o'clock low and closing fast. Romano swings his guns around and looks through the new reflector sight. The glowing reticle floats in his vision, centered over the approaching fighter. In his peripheral view, the mirrors reveal the alignment of his gun barrels, giving him instant feedback about exactly where his weapons are pointing. He fires a 3-second burst. The tracers, visible in the mirrors, show he is still shooting behind the fighter. He adjusts, leading the target by the width of the reticle. He fires again. This time, his tracers and the enemy aircraft intersect. The Bf-109's engine erupts in flames. The fighter rolls inverted, spiraling toward the ground as thick black smoke pours from it. Romano stares at his guns, then at the mirrors, then at the empty patch of sky where the fighter had been moments earlier. "Holy," he whispers into his oxygen mask. "It works." Romano lands at 1340 hours with his first confirmed kill. The celebration lasts only 20 minutes. At 1400 hours, during a routine post-flight inspection, Crew Chief Master Sergeant Donald Pierce discovers the unauthorized modifications. He immediately reports to the squadron armament officer, Captain Richard Voss, who storms onto the hardstand with a clipboard and an expression of controlled fury. "Sergeant Romano," Voss says, voice sharp with military precision, "would you care to explain the unauthorized equipment installed in your gun position?" Sergeant Romano stands at attention. "Sir, I installed an improved sighting system." "You installed what?" Voss barks. "Do you have the faintest idea how many regulations you violated? Technical Order 0120-EG2 explicitly prohibits unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. This isn't a hot rod in your backyard, Sergeant. This is a combat aircraft. Unapproved modifications can compromise structural integrity, create fire hazards, interfere with other systems." "Sir, the system works. I shot down. I don't care if you shot down the entire Luftwaffe," Voss snaps, pointing toward the tail section. "That equipment is not Army Air Force's standard. It is not Boeing approved. It hasn't undergone testing of any kind. Remove it immediately, or I will have you court-martialed for destruction of government property." Romano's pilot, Lieutenant Holbrook, steps forward. "Captain, my tail gunner got his first kill today using that sight. Maybe we should—" "Your opinion is noted, Lieutenant. The modification will be removed. That is final." Word spreads across the 91st Bomb Group like wildfire. By evening mess, every gunner on base knows about Romano's illegal mirror sight and his first kill. Opinions split sharply. Veteran gunners crowd around Romano, peppering him with questions. How hard is it to install? What's the field of view like? Can the mirrors survive slipstream forces at 200 miles per hour? But the engineering officers and senior maintenance staff are alarmed. Captain Theodore Morrison, the group's assistant armament officer, calls an emergency meeting on October 11th. 14 officers attend. The tone is immediately hostile. "Gentlemen, we have a discipline problem. A sergeant has performed unauthorized modifications using salvaged components of unknown origin. This sets a dangerously irresponsible precedent. If every enlisted man decides to re-engineer his weapon system based on personal preference—" The room explodes. "With respect, sir, that's absurd," says Major William Calhoun, the operations officer. He stands. "Romano shot down an enemy fighter using this system. Our tail gunners are averaging 8% hit rates. If this modification improves that even slightly—" "Slightly?" Morrison interrupts, face tightening. "Major, we have no data, no validation, no testing. One successful engagement does not prove." "Then test it," Calhoun fires back. "Put Romano in the air tomorrow with the modification still installed. Gun cameras will give us objective footage. If it doesn't work, remove it. If it does work, maybe we should be installing these things instead of threatening to court-martial the man who invented them." The argument grows heated. Engineering officers cite safety concerns. Combat officers cite casualty numbers. The meeting dissolves into shouting. At 2000 hours, the dispute reaches Colonel Stanley Ray, commanding officer of the 91st Bomb Group. Ray, age 53, is a career officer and a World War I bomber pilot known for equal parts discipline and pragmatism. He listens to both sides for 90 minutes without saying a word. Finally, he asks, "How many bombers did we lose last week?" Silence follows. "Captain Morrison, I asked you a question." 17, sir. 17 B-17s from this group alone. "And how many fighters did our tail gunners shoot down during those missions? Confirmed kills?" 3, sir. Ray nods slowly. 17 bombers. 680 American boys. For 3 confirmed German fighters? He turns toward Morrison. "Captain, your concerns about unauthorized modifications are noted. Your concerns about regulations are valid, but I am more concerned about losing 17 goddamn airplanes every week because our defensive armament doesn't work." He looks at Romano. "Sergeant, your modification stays on your aircraft. You will fly the next 3 missions with gun cameras recording every engagement. If your hit rate improves measurably, we'll authorize installation across the group. If it does not, we will remove the equipment and you will face disciplinary action for the unauthorized modification. Understood?" Romano snaps to attention. "Yes, sir." Ray rises. "Gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned. And someone get me a set of those damned mirror drawings."
October 12, 1943. Romano flies his 4th combat mission with a modified sight system installed and gun cameras recording every moment. The 8th Air Force sends 236 B-17s against submarine construction facilities. Luftwaffe fighter wings scramble 250 interceptors to engage them. At 11:23 hours over the German coast, the attacks begin. A Focke-Wulf 190 dives from 7 o'clock high. Romano tracks it through the reflector sight, the illuminated reticle giving him an immediate aiming reference. In his peripheral vision, the mirrors reveal his gun alignment. He fires a 4-second burst, adjusting in real time as the reflected tracer paths show exactly where his bullets are going. The FW-190's wing root erupts in flames. The fighter breaks off, trailing smoke. At 11:47 hours, a Bf-109 approaches from 6 o'clock level, the classic tail attack profile. Romano centers the reticle, checks his mirror feedback, and fires. The 109's canopy shatters. The fighter rolls inverted and drops out of the fight. Gun camera footage captures both engagements clearly. Romano returns to Bassingbourn with 2 confirmed kills and 1 probable. His total ammunition expenditure is 380 rounds, only 190 rounds per kill. This stands in stark contrast to the roughly 2,800 rounds per kill typically required by standard tail gunners. The engineering staff analyzes the footage. Captain Morrison watches the tracer patterns and tracking sequences. Even he cannot deny the truth. The mirror-reflector combination allows real-time fire correction that is impossible with ring and bead sights. "All right," Morrison concedes, "it works, but we need proper engineering drawings, standardized components, and installation procedures before we can authorize group-wide implementation." "How long?" Colonel Ray asks. 6 weeks at minimum. We'd need to coordinate with 8th Air Force Headquarters, submit modification proposals. "We don't have 6 weeks. Ray turns to Technical Sergeant Kellerman. "How many of these systems can you build per day with the materials we have?" Kellerman thinks for a moment. With help from the sheet metal shop, maybe 4 complete assemblies a day, if we scavenge reflector sights from damaged fighters and make the mirror brackets here. "Then start building," Ray orders. "I want every tail gunner in this group equipped within 2 weeks. Morrison objects. "Sir, without proper authorization from 8th Air Force Headquarters..." "Captain, I will deal with 8th Air Force. You handle the engineering specifications." Dismissed.
What follows is an improvised manufacturing effort that would horrify any military procurement office. Kellerman and his maintenance team scavenged components from all over Bassingbourn Airfield, reflector sights from written-off P-47 fighters, mirrors from damaged navigation tools, aluminum stock from supply depots. They establish an assembly line inside the maintenance hangar, producing 4 complete mirror sight systems each day. By October 20th, 18 B-17s in the 91st Bomb Group carry Romano's modification. The effect is immediate and dramatic. October 20th, Durin mission. Tail gunners equipped with the mirror-reflector sights score 11 confirmed kills out of 47 fighter attacks, a hit rate of 23.4%, nearly triple the previous average. November 3rd, Wilhelmshaven mission. 16 confirmed kills from 68 engagements, hit rate 23.5%. November 5th, Gelsenkirchen mission. 13 confirmed kills, hit rate 21.8%. The mathematical impact on bomber survivability is transformative. Luftwaffe pilots, long accustomed to approaching B-17s from the rear with relative impunity, suddenly face accurate, sustained tail gun fire. German after-action reports note a sudden rise in the effectiveness of American tail gunners and recommend altering attack tactics. Major Hans Joachim Jabs, a Luftwaffe night fighter ace temporarily assigned to daytime operations, writes in his combat diary, "The flying fortresses have become significantly more dangerous. Their tail gunners now display accuracy previously seen only in powered turrets. Attacks from the rear quadrant now carry unacceptable risk." Word reaches 8th Air Force Headquarters at High Wycombe. On November 18th, Brigadier General Frederick Castle, commander of the 4th Bombardment Wing, arrives at Bassingbourn unannounced. He personally inspects Romano's tail position, reviews the gun camera footage, and interviews Romano for half an hour. "Sergeant, how did you know this would work?" Romano shrugs. "I didn't, sir, but the old sights definitely didn't work, so I figured anything else might be an improvement." Castle laughs, the first time anyone has laughed about tailgun accuracy in months. He studies the mirror assembly, checking the range of motion. "This can be manufactured at depot level." "Yes, sir. Sergeant Kellerman has proper engineering drawings now. Most of the components are salvaged, but we can source real materials if needed." Castle nods. "I'm authorizing immediate implementation across the 4th Wing. Every B-17 will receive this modification within 30 days. He looks directly at Romano. "Sergeant, you have probably saved more American lives than you will ever know." By December 1943, Romano's mirror-reflector sight system, officially designated the Field Expedient Tailgun Aiming System Type 1, is installed in more than 200 B-17s across multiple bomb groups. The 8th Air Force commissions formal engineering evaluations. Meanwhile, Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center, already developing the improved Cheyenne tail turret, incorporates Romano's reflector sight principles directly into its final design. When the production Cheyenne turret begins appearing on B-17Gs in January 1944, it features an N8 reflector sight mounted almost exactly where Romano placed his salvaged P-47 sight in his improvised tailgun installation. The improvement in bomber crew survivability rates is measurable and significant.
For B-17 groups equipped with the improved tail sighting systems, losses from rear-angle attacks dropped by roughly 35% between October 1943 and March 1944. In practical terms, that meant dozens of bombers and hundreds of airmen survived missions they otherwise would have died on, all thanks to a modification one engineering captain initially dismissed as illegal and dangerous. Romano continued flying combat missions through February 1944. His personal tally eventually reached 7 confirmed kills and 4 probables, an extraordinary record for a tail gunner.
But even more impactful was how his innovation spread. It moved through the 8th Air Force, then to the 15th Air Force in Italy, and eventually influenced defensive armament upgrades on B-24 Liberators as well. On February 22, 1944, during Big Week, the massive coordinated assault on German aircraft production facilities, Romano's bomber took severe flak damage over Leipzig. He remained at his guns, firing through clouds of hydraulic fluid and fuel spraying across the tail section. The aircraft crash-landed in Belgium. The crew survived. Romano spent the final months of the war in a German POW camp. Michael Romano returned to the United States in May 1945, weighing just 127 pounds, 18 pounds lighter than when he enlisted. The Army Air Forces awarded him the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement in aerial combat and acknowledged his innovative contribution to defensive armament effectiveness. The official citation carefully avoided mentioning that his innovation was once considered unauthorized and prohibited. Romano never sought attention. He declined interview requests from military journals. When Boeing engineers invited him to their Seattle facilities to discuss the Cheyenne turret's development, he politely refused, saying, "I just made what I needed to survive. Other people turned it into something official." He went back to Pittsburgh, married his high school sweetheart, and spent 37 years working as a machinist. He rarely spoke about the war. His children grew up knowing only that their father flew in bombers and fixed some gun sights. But the legacy of his improvised mirror-reflector system extended far beyond his modest life. The production B-17G Cheyenne tail turret, designed with reflector sight principles that originated with Romano, became standard equipment on all late-war flying fortresses. Boeing produced 8,680 B-17Gs between August 1943 and April 1945. The vast majority included advanced tailgun sighting systems directly descended from Romano's field modification. The increased effectiveness of tailgunners forced the Luftwaffe to abandon their preferred 6 o'clock low attack pattern. German pilots shifted toward head-on attacks, far more dangerous for them, but necessary to avoid the devastating accuracy of improved tail defenses. This tactical shift contributed to growing Luftwaffe losses throughout 1944. Post-war analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey quantified the effect. B-17 groups equipped with improved tailgun sights suffered 32 to 37% fewer rear-angle losses than earlier aircraft across thousands of missions. Statistically, that reduction meant roughly 840 bombers and 8,400 crewmen survived combat who otherwise would have been lost. The principles Romano pioneered, combining a reflector sight with peripheral vision aids and real-time feedback, shaped post-war defensive armament design. Modern tailgun systems on aircraft like the B-52 Stratofortress use sophisticated computing sights, but the core idea remains the same. Give the gunner the clearest possible understanding of where his weapons are pointing and how his targets are moving. In 1983, the 91st Bomb Group Association held a reunion at Bassingbourn Airfield, now preserved as a historical site. Several tailgunners who had flown with Romano's mirror-reflector systems attended. One of them, Gerald Hammond, brought with him a salvaged mirror bracket he had kept for 40 years. Standing before Romano, now 60 years old, gray-haired and a grandfather, Hammond said quietly, "Because of you and those mirrors, I came home. My kids exist because you couldn't accept lousy gun sights. Thank you." Romano, uncomfortable with emotional praise, shrugged and replied, "You would have done the same thing. We all just wanted to survive long enough to go home." But he was wrong. Thousands of tail gunners faced the same inadequate sights, the same impossible firing solutions, the same deadly odds. Only one refused to accept the status quo. Only one had the audacity to break regulations, the creativity to improvise a solution, and the courage to risk court-martial for the possibility of saving lives. Michael Romano died in 2003 at the age of 79. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his military service in a single line: World War II veteran, 8th Air Force. It did not mention that he saved thousands of lives with mirrors and salvaged aircraft parts. It did not mention that his illegal modification became standard equipment. It did not mention that while generals and engineers debated procedures and protocols, a 22-year-old factory worker from Pittsburgh solved a problem they couldn't. Because the best innovations rarely come from waiting for permission. They come from people who refuse to watch others die while bureaucracy demands patience. Romano's lesson endures. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't following orders, it's knowing when the rules matter less than the lives at stake.